Hi, my name is Shuli Karkowsky, and I am the CEO of Moving Traditions. For those who are joining us who don't know what Moving Traditions is, Moving Traditions runs programs that tries to address two of the trends we're seeing among teens these days. The first that is that, and we're going to hear about this in the research, a lot of teens are struggling. Some are dealing with serious mental health issues. Others are dealing with the more mundane things we all remember from being a teen: social pressures, academic pressures, bullying, feeling like you don't fit in. And we really feel like teens across that spectrum need our support, especially since the world has become so much more complicated to navigate. The second trend that Moving Traditions tries to address is that many teens are choosing not to engage in Jewish life. Or if they are engaging in Jewish life, they're finding education or engagement that can feel stilted or boring or not quite relevant to them. And Moving Traditions understands that the solution to both of those problems is intertwined. Research consistently shows that teens engaged in meaningful Jewish community are significantly more likely to be happy, to face hard things with resilience. And conversely, kids who are already thriving are much more likely to engage in Jewish life. So we know we need to sort of take this handshake approach to both of those issues. How does Moving Tradition do this? We create curriculum that merges deep and meaningful Jewish engagement with social and emotional learning. What we mean by that is using the magic and depth of Jewish ritual and thought to help teens develop three different things. The first is shleimut, the Hebrew term for wholeness. By that we mean giving teens a sense that they deserve to be loved, whoever they are. The second value we're looking for with teens is chesed, which in Hebrew means kindness, but by that we mean the skills to build community, teaching them how to be a good friend, how to tolerate discomfort or difficult conversations, how to engage with people in productive ways. And finally, we know that if you give teens confidence, which we call shleimut, and we give them that social capital, that sense that they're part of a larger community that supports them, which we call chesed, we know that you already have teens who are ready to change the world for the better, which is our third value, which we call tzedek, or justice. Moving Traditions provides curriculum and training to hundreds of institutions across North America, including synagogues, schools, camps, lots of other institutions. We've developed relationships with thousands of educators to help them better serve the teens that they work with at their institutions. But we also run programs that work directly with teens, and particularly with teens who are already ready to pursue tzedek, who are already ready to start building toward a better world. And in fact, we want to start this entire program by introducing one of those teens. We were going to have two teens with us. Unfortunately, our second teen, Talia, has been affected by the wildfires in California, and so she was unable to join us. But I am not worried about Amalya being able to handle representing teens in this room. So Amalya, can you just start us off? Tell us your name, your age, where you live, and share a little bit about how you're involved with Moving Traditions and how it connects to what we're going to hear about tonight.
Right, so, hi, I'm Amalya. I'm 17 and I live in Western Massachusetts. I'm a first-year Koleinu fellow, and through Koleinu, each fellow creates a capstone. And for my capstone, I'm making a short documentary on younger kids' mental health. I chose this as my project because I've struggled with anxiety most of my life. And it started particularly bad when I was in third grade, and it just felt so isolating and it felt very overlooked. So I wanted to bring light to what that experience is like and just kind of give a look into that.
Thanks, Amalya. So we're going to hear more from Amalya very, very soon. Amalya is going to be on the panel of people who respond to the data we're going to see. But you're going to hear throughout the panel that Moving Traditions tries to center teens themselves. Teens, both like Amalya, and Amalya really represents the full swath of teens that we talk to, because it's both teens who are ready to take on a social change project, who are ready to say, I know the change I want to see in the world and I want to help work towards it. And teens who are saying also and I also need more support and life can also be hard and please help me with that. And Amalya, you're so bravely sharing both of those sides of yourself with us tonight. So thank you for doing that. That's part of why this study is so important to us, and we're so grateful to BeWell and to the BeWell initiative at JFNA for sponsoring the study. In case you don't know, BeWell is a national initiative at the Jewish Federations of North America that seeks to help Jewish organizations to understand and respond to the growing mental health crisis. BeWell is the one who commissioned this groundbreaking project about a year ago. Their motivation, which really makes them kindred spirits with moving traditions, was noticing the skyrocketing rates of teenage anxiety and historic levels of sadness and hopelessness. And on the other hand, also their belief that Jewish tradition can be a powerful force for well-being in the world. And that's kind of what motivates moving traditions as well. We're so excited and grateful to the BeWell initiative for funding this research. I know two of our favorite colleagues, Sarah and Kate, I think are here with us tonight. They even said, if you guys can't answer a question, you can turn the camera on us, which I thought was a brave, brave thing to have said to us. But that all explains why the study was commissioned. It doesn't tell us what's in the study. And for that, we have Dr. Alana Kinarsky, who we are so grateful to have with us today. Many of you saw that Dr. Tobin Belzer was supposed to be with us. Unfortunately, she too has been affected by the wildfires in California, which is mind-boggling to think even just within this webinar how many people it is affecting. And so just holding that in our hearts for a moment. But we are so lucky to have Alana here instead. Alana is a social science researcher with particular experience in both teens and the Jewish community, so this is right up her alley. She's currently a postdoctoral scholar at UCLA and runs an independent evaluation consultancy. But for purposes of tonight, most importantly, she was an integral member of the research team for this national study. So Alana, why don't you take a few minutes and give us a little bit of a sense of what the data says?
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to join you all. Thanks for spending your evening with us. Let me just take a second and try to successfully share my slides with you, and then we'll jump in. Let's see how that goes. Everyone can see it. Great. Okay, good. Yeah, thanks for having me. I just want to acknowledge again that I know you all were expecting Tobin. She is a brilliant and wonderful colleague and researcher, and I will do my best to try and fill her shoes, but thinking of everyone impacted in LA. I am calling in from Portland, Oregon, where I live and work. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this national study that we did examining the well-being of American Jewish teens. And let me share a little bit about the purpose of the study. There's a lot of extensive research that exists on American teens' well-being, and we kind of have a sense that there is a mental health crisis going on. And the team at BeWell realized that there was a crucial gap in understanding the unique experiences of Jewish teens. And Jewish teens are navigating not only like these universal adolescent challenges like school and peer relationships, but probably also have really distinctly Jewish ones, not to mention anti-Semitism and the aftermath of October 7th more recently. So BeWell commissioned the study, and I got to work with this beautiful, brilliant research team to then collaborate with BeWell as well as a research advisory team. So there were lots of voices and input on how this study was designed and the recruitment efforts, as well as the analysis and interpretation efforts. So while I'm sharing it with you, please know there's a long, long list of others that have really deeply impacted this work. And their intention with this research was to really find data that would be helpful to everyone who cares for and works with Jewish teens. So today, let's talk about what we heard from nearly 2,500 Jewish teens across the country shared their experience with us. And I want to share some of the key findings from the study. Before I do that, I wouldn't be a good researcher if I didn't kick it off with some guiding research questions for the study. So let me bore you with that real quick. I try to keep them as simple as possible. The first one is, how are American Jewish teens doing today? Next one is, what are the key stressors for Jewish teens? And the third is, where are Jewish teens finding community and support? These seem so simple written here, but pretty hard to quickly capture this in short attention spans and in a survey and across the country. So glad we could kind of simplify it here. And the way that we tried to get at well-being, I just want to touch on that real quick because there's lots of different definitions of well-being and understandings of that. And we relied on the EPOC measure of adolescent well-being. It's a 20 questions that were designed to evaluate the well-being of adolescents between the age of 10 and 18. And it's based on the theory of flourishing, which is in the School of Positive Psychology. And there are 5 dimensions of teen well-being that are identified. So let's walk through them. You won't be surprised to know the first one, it starts with an E. It's engagement. It's a bit different than you might imagine if you work in Jewish teen programming. This one is all about the capacity for a teen to become absorbed in the activities that they are working in, to show focus and a pursuit in like hobbies and schoolwork. Kind of think like flow state here. Second one is P, perseverance. And that's their ability to stick with goals and complete tasks despite challenges. O is for optimism, having a hopeful and really confident attitude about the future. Next is connectedness. This is really trying to get a sense of the quality of their relationships with others. Do they feel valued and supported by family and friends? And last one is H, happiness. And this one is the extent to which they have experience with positive emotions and feel content in life. So these were sort of the grounding questions in the study. And now let me tell you who was part of the study. So as I mentioned, it's a national study. We were really thrilled to get responses from 49 states, as well as DC and Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, we didn't get a complete response from a Jewish teen in West Virginia. But we did get responses from 2,490 teens. And a little bit about the demographics. So in the study, most teens were in high school, 10th and 11th grade. The majority of them were female. And while 31% were also male, 10% had multiple and other identities, such as non-binary. 63% of teens in the data set identified as straight, and nearly 1/3 identified in other ways, like bisexual, lesbian, gay, or had multiple sexual identities. And then 74% of them identified as white, while 16% had multiple racial identities. And before I jump us into findings, one more thing that I think is probably important to share here so that you can understand the findings. First is that recruitment, like our ability to try and reach teens across the country, really happened through Jewish teen-facing organizations. We did try and do word-of-mouth recruitment efforts to reach those teens that are not connected to Jewish teen programming, but Jewish teens who are actively engaged in Jewish activities and communities are likely overrepresented in our sample, so just hold that. And then the second thing to know that's also important is sort of the timing of the study. So while we started this research and the creating this research well before October 7th happened, the survey itself went out in April and was in the field until June of 2024. And if you think back to that time, there was significant tension on college campuses, a lot of concern about anti-Semitism, the ongoing war in Israel and Gaza. So all of those things, the timing and the recruitment efforts really are important to hold as you analyze and consider the findings. Having said that, let's see what that snapshot in time showed us. So here are some of the findings that the research team, as well as the BeWell team, thought were really important and worth discussing. So first is that teens who said that being Jewish is important to them reported higher levels of overall well-being. So when we asked teens about the importance of being Jewish in their lives, 91% of them said it was very or somewhat important to them personally. So in the study, we talk about this as Jewish identity centrality, the personal importance that teens place on being Jewish. And then when we started to examine which aspects of a teen's Jewish experience correlated with their overall well-being in each of the 5 dimensions on the epoch scale, we found that Jewish identity centrality emerged as the strongest predictor. And you'll notice here on the left side of the epoch scale, so you're looking at the blue is engagement, the purple is perseverance, and so on. But on the left side, it talks about effect size. And I'm happy to dive into that more if it needs more clarity, but the effects were modest in size, but they were consistent and meaningful. So teens who felt that being Jewish was important to them scored higher across all 5 dimensions of Jewish well-being. And to take a little bit of a broader picture of effects on well-being, just want to also show you the impact that a few of the other high-scoring variables had. So Here you'll see family Jewish identity centrality in the middle and frequency of program participation on the, I guess it's my right, hopefully it's your right too. Maybe this is a good place to say effect size, in case it's helpful, indicates how meaningful a relationship is between variables. So the larger the effect size, the more meaningful the relationship in the world of statistics, in case that's a helpful sort of summary of it. So while these effects aren't huge, they, like I said earlier, are meaningful, especially given how many different factors you can consider influence teen well-being. So in this graph, you'll see that in addition to personal Jewish identity centrality, family Jewish identity centrality, meaning when we ask teens how important is being Jewish to your family, that also predicted all dimensions of epoch on the epoch scale as well. And while personal identity centrality had larger effects on well-being, family identity centrality came through as well as important. And then interestingly, the frequency of program participation in Jewish teen programming significantly predicted optimism, but not really other dimensions of well-being. And optimism, from the definition earlier, is again about being hopeful and having sort of a confident attitude about the future. So it's, I would say, a great area for future research to try and understand that more. So leaving finding 1 and building on that in finding 2, here we see the second finding is American Jewish teens face a dual burden. They contend with universal challenges of adolescence while also grappling with the unique pressures that arise from being Jewish. So what this actually looks like in the survey is we gave teens a list of 21 potential sources of stress, and for each of them, you'll see at the bottom of the chart here, so ask them to report, does it cause you no stress, some stress, or a lot of stress? And analyzing that, here's what we found. You can see at the top, we have school-related stress and stress related to the war in Israel and Gaza and anti-Semitism as their top 2 issues overall. And then in the top 5, we found relationships with parents, peer pressure, self-image, and as well as gender and sexuality identity were all in the top 5 of concerns causing stress to these teens. So like their non-Jewish peers, this clearly shows that they're dealing with stress around things like academic pressure and social dynamics. And then layered on top of that are distinctly Jewish stressors like the war and anti-Semitism. In the report that should be coming out in the next few weeks and months, there's a lot of great quotes from the teens that responded, but I pulled one specifically here to help illustrate sort of this dual burden, and it's from an 11th grader. They wrote, if you don't mind me just reading this for you, but they wrote, walking past students in school who I've seen chant Hamas slogans causes me stress. Trying to explain my feelings about the topic to my non-Jewish friends causes me stress. Knowing that it is safer for me to remove my Star of David necklace in public and being cautious of who I share my identity with causes me stress. It was really clear in the data and from the many responses, written in responses that we got from teens, that they're not just navigating typical stress about their grades and relationships, though those are really significant. They're also having concerns about their physical safety and sort of social pressure as Jewish teens that add another layer of stress to their life, thus the dual burden. And also, just to note, interestingly, something that connects finding 1 and finding 2, or interesting at least to me, and I hope you share it, is that Jewish teens who reported stronger Jewish identity centrality, so answered that question of how important is Jewish identity to you personally, and have greater overall well-being, they also then expressed more stress related to school and the ongoing conflict in Israel and Gaza. So while Jewish identity centrality is positively correlated with overall well-being, it's also here predictive of experiencing both more general and Jewish-specific stressors. So this interplay is important to sort of hold, and I think it's probably it's a pattern that we've observed with other minority adolescent populations. So where like a cultural identity can both provide a source of strength and a source of challenge. let's move on to our third and final finding that I'll present here. So the third finding reveals that Jewish teens have multiple contexts and people in their lives that allow for authentic self-expression, which supports positive well-being outcomes. So for this one in the survey, we gave teens a list of places where they feel like they can be their full selves and asked them to write in anything that wasn't in the list. And then we tallied the responses, and we were really pleased to see that 34% had 6 or more places where they could be their full selves. Another 29% then you said 4 or 5, and so on. And here are the places that they identified. So we found that American Jewish teens find strength in sort of personal validation in really close relationships. So at the top of that list is 79% feel that they can be their full selves with Jewish friends. 72% said with their family. And about 50% reported feeling the same way at summer camp and with non-Jewish friends. A little bit further down the list, you see approximately 40% feel this way with Jewish spaces like congregations and teen programs. So there's a lot more to sort of unpack, and there's a bit more about that in the report that we can go into as well. Maybe I'll stop here and just offer sort of a summary of the 3 findings all on one page so you can see them, and be happy to well, let me summarize them one more time just so you can hear them, especially if someone's calling in. But the first one is teens who said that being Jewish was important to them reported higher levels of overall well-being. The second finding is that American Jewish teens face a dual burden. They contend with universal challenges while also grappling with unique pressures. And third is that Jewish teens do have multiple contexts and people in their lives that allow for authentic self-expression and provide support for those positive well-being outcomes. So a complex and hopeful picture, and really insightful and interesting to hear from this number of teens, and hopefully we can continue to unpack it and discuss these findings together.
That was great, Alana. I feel like there's the great-great-grandmother in me is saying like, oh, I get this study. It tells me like, oh, is it hard to be Jewish? But it's worth it. So like, it's so worth it. So that's the too long didn't read version that you're going to get from me. I'm actually going to welcome all of our panelists back together, and we're going to have a lot of questions for Alana, for Amalya, and for Daniel. And you all got to meet Amalya and you got to meet Alana already. So I'm going to introduce Daniel as soon. There's Rabbi Brenner. Rabbi Daniel Brenner is my dear colleague at Moving Traditions, our Vice President of Education. He weaves together ancient wisdom, developmental psychology, embodied practice, and pulp culture to help anyone who interacts with teens just do it better. And I can say with true earnestness, he is someone I turn to all the time for parenting advice, usually while hiking, which are some of my favorite things to do and talk with Rabbi Daniel Brenner about. So we're going to use this group of people to talk about questions. I'm going to start with a list of questions I have, which includes a lot of the questions we received beforehand through the registration. And then I'll welcome people. I'm going to try to keep an eye on the chat. If you do have questions you want to send to the hosts and panelists as an option or put in the chat, we're going to start with some of these questions. And then if we have time, move to some live questions from the audience. So research and data is so important, but I think even every good researcher will say it gets really fleshed out by hearing real life stories. So I want to actually start with Amalya. Amalya, could you share with us, what did you see in the research that really rang true to you from your own experience? And what made you say, well, that's a little different than what I'm experiencing as a teen?
I mean, I think it is so true that like being a Jewish teenager comes with like the positives and also, the drawbacks. So it's like I went to a Jewish elementary school, a Jewish day school, and it was super small. I had 7 kids in my class, and my friend group from there is still my friend group to this day. And like, I wouldn't have gotten that, in like a big, or maybe I would have, but like, I don't know, it feels different to have like that group that really knows that particular experience. And I go to a Jewish sleepaway camp, and like, I'm actually going to see them this weekend. And it's like such a special community that you get to be a part of, but also it does have that kind of drawbacks that like, especially last year, there was a lot of talk, October 7th, conflict, what's happening in Gaza. And so instead of like doing my homework, I would spend some nights, responding to like Instagram stories that were promoting harmful messages. Or I would like overhear an offhand comment in class, and then the conversation would move on. And I would spend the rest of class just being like, well, should I have responded? Should I have not have? Like, it would just like consume me and I wouldn't know what to do. And then, I would go and I'd find one of my friends and I'd be like, I heard this. I didn't really know what to do. And, like it is really important to have that support system, because without that, like, I don't know what I would have done last year. So, yeah, I think it was very true. Like, positives, the negatives, overall, I'll take it. It's worth it. But
Thanks, Amalya. I mean, it's hard to hear, but also so important to hear sort of your real life experience reflecting what we see. I think that makes me want to turn it to Daniel, which is hearing, this mixed message we're getting for Jewish teens right now. What's your advice for parents with what to do with all of this information?
So, first, I just want to say, Amalya, what you just said about like you're trying to do your homework and then you got to respond to something on Instagram is kind of the perfect line about this study, because when I think about what concerns parents have for children, and particularly for Jewish children, I think um, just because we value education so much, we put so much pressure on our kids to succeed academically. And I think that so many of my friends, like the most challenging year for us was when we found out like what colleges our kids got into, and like that was just crazy. So like that is very real in the Jewish community. I know that the last study that I saw said that 89% of Jewish high school students go on to college. So like that is a big emphasis for us. Um, and I think the other thing that I'm hearing is the things that are happening thousands of miles away from us are impacting us in our daily interactions. And the things that I remind parents of is that it's much more important to understand what your teen is experiencing with their friend group than it is to convince your teen of any particular political point. And I do feel like the the challenges that I've heard that parents have really had to support their teens on are interpersonal challenges where mainly a their child is experiencing tension within a friendship and trying to figure out, is this a time when I give feedback to somebody? Because I know if I give them that feedback, they might not be friends with me. And yet I want to give them that feedback. I feel responsible as a Jewish person to say, I want us to look at the different perspectives on this issue. This is a conflict that is thousands of years old, et cetera, et cetera. All the things that we as Jews have been forced to say, because you can't reduce our history to a meme. But like I think that's a reality that many parents are facing, that these dual stresses are very real, and they're real in their kids' lives. And one of the things that I see that's like very hopeful, talking about the optimism piece, Alana, is that parents are playing that role for their teens and are being supportive for their teens. And I've been seeing that more and more in research, not only about Jewish teens, but about teens in general. And I think that that's an interesting shift. I feel like parents are more in conversation with teens today, which is a very helpful thing. Parents are a little bit more understanding of teens. And I don't think that means that parents are really reducing the academic pressure they put on teens, because that's just part of being a parent. But I do feel like the parents are making a little bit more space for teens and listening to teens. So that is a positive, and I hope that we can support that.
And I'm going to lift up something that you were saying, Daniel, which is I talk to a lot of parents of teens about what their kids are going through. And one of the most common questions I get are like, what are the talking points I should give them? How do I teach them how to respond? And those are good questions that we get from parents, but I just want to lift up the even better question a parent can ask, which is like, What are you going through? How are you feeling? What's hard for you? To ask your kids those questions, not only because your kid needs that space to process, but also because those are much richer entry points to those conversations of like, here's what we believe, here's what I believe. How does that resonate for you, kiddo? And how do you want to build on what you just heard from me? How does it become your own? And how do you are you different from me? And how are you the same? And that dialogue instead of those talking points is going to lead to a much richer conversation with your child.
I really like that approach. And I want to say one other thing, which really I think is very important. There is a writer, researcher about adolescence, Lisa Damore, and she talks about how parents naturally say, "Oh, I just want you to be happy." And actually, that is a kind of toxic optimism. You shouldn't expect anybody to be happy all the time. Like nobody's happy all the time. And instead of thinking, I just want my child to be happy or I just want you to be happy, I think that as parents, one of the shifts that we have to make when living with teenagers is to say, I want you to feel the appropriate things at the appropriate time. Like if you don't feel happy, that's okay. There's a space for sadness. If you feel anxious, you can feel that anxiety. I don't need you to erase it immediately. If you feel depressed, like whatever it is, I just want to make sure that you're feeling the full range of emotion, that you're feeling the right emotion at the right time, and you're not stuck. And I think that that's like a message I want to just put out there to parents is that we often expect, we want our children to be happy every single day and love us every single day and send us heart emojis or whatever. But, it's not going to be the case. And I think making space for teenagers is one of the other things that parents are learning to do better.
Um, we had over 100 questions submitted to us in advance, and a huge number of them were about anti-Semitism and the war in Israel and how teens are responding to that. And I'm going to throw this to all three of you, Alana, Rabbi Daniel Brenner, Amalya, whoever wants to answer this first. Like, what are you seeing when it comes to surging anti-Semitism with regard to teens? And what do you recommend to parents or teens or educators as a result?
I really want to defer to Amalia because I know that you've had experiences and you're in a public school in Western Massachusetts and like that must be really challenging. We talked a little bit about it when we spoke, but what are your thoughts?
Um, I mean, my school, I live in Northampton, Massachusetts, which it's a very liberal town, which I love. It's amazing. But with that comes kind of trying to figure out how to say this. When things come up, my school takes to it very, very quickly and kind of they'll see something on social media and it's like, oh, and now I believe this fully. And I think it is really good that I've got a politically active school and it's such a complicated issue. And a lot of what they're saying, a lot of what the kids in my school are saying is, I think, really important stuff. But then it kind of gets misconstrued, and twisted. And like, so we had like a walkout for Palestine, which was great, but then it led to a lot of conversation that there was some misinformation and just harmful messages and kind of this disregard for Jewish students and what that was like. And like, I'm trying to think of like specifics on the spot now. It's hard, but yeah, just a lot of like really good messages that kind of get twisted and like taken out of.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest challenges that I've seen, and I've talked with teenagers around the country, about how they've experienced either anti-Semitism or some kind of anti-Zionism that leaked into anti-Semitism, is that they weren't sure if it was okay to give feedback to either their friends or give feedback to a teacher or give feedback to their guidance counselor in their high school or give feedback to the principal of their school. And so some of those teenagers did talk about this with a parent. Some of those teenagers I know did not talk about it with a parent because they just felt like, well, it's not going to do anything, so why should I bother? I think I remember one teenager said to me, adults, they're the worst. So don't expect them to change anything. Like, and I was like shocked to hear that. It was deeply pessimistic. But I think it rang true to something which I think we need to pay attention to. That one of the realities for Jewish teenagers is they are seen in an anti-Semitic light. They are seen as the most privileged people. So the most privileged people do not get to complain, do not get to critique things, do not get to have a voice which says, I'm being oppressed, I'm being hurt, I'm being silenced. So I think that's real, and it's something that many Jewish teenagers are experiencing for the first time in this last year and a half or so. And it is something that I'm hoping that as the researchers look at this, going forward, that we pay attention to, because I think that is something that is new. And I don't know, Amalya, if you felt like what I just said is resonates for you. Okay, it does. Okay. But like I feel like we as educators and parents need to pay attention to the challenge of Jewish people facing oppression again, because we are not supposed to say, what about my rights? Because everybody looks at us like, oh, you own the media or you own whatever, all the anti-Semitism comes out. You have so much privilege. You sit on the board, whatever it is. And the reality is that most Jewish teens are just like, no, I'm like sitting on the bench of the soccer team. I just want to get to play. And I'm like, or whatever it is. And you're just navigating your life and your, as we say in Jewish world, daladama, your personal space, and trying to make your way through the world.
So I think that's so important to lift up how Jewish, I was going to ask how Jewish stereotypes are sort of have their own silencing effect on how much Jews are allowed to talk about the anti-Semitism they're seeing. Alana, it looked like you were going to add on to that, which I'd love to hear.
I was just going to say I really appreciated the question about anti-Semitism and sort of the conflict in that time period in which the data was collected. It was a really for all the teens that said that anti-Semitism or the ongoing war in Israel and Gaza were a cause of stress for them, were invited to also expand on it. So we heard from a lot of teens and got the opportunity to read through a lot of really thoughtful reflections that gave us a real sense of like how this was impacting teens and what they were struggling with. And the report goes into quite some detail about it. But I will say one of the things that's really stayed with me is teens' voices asking for a place to reflect and discuss what's happening honestly. Like this sort of like tension of I'm seeing this on social media, I'm hearing this at my congregation, my friends are saying this, my teacher said that, the news is saying this, the other news is saying that, and like my parents said this, but my friend's parents said that, and like having places where they feel like they can engage in honest and difficult conversations in calm ways really came across from a number of teens and has really stayed with me. I thought that was a really insightful request for just like calm spaces to talk through really difficult experiences that are both personal and global.
A lot of you have I don't even have this in my notes to mention that Moving Traditions just put together an Israel education curriculum that is that first of all really welcomes teens' voices, that gives them the message like you don't need to understand everything that's going on in Israel to notice that like I'm having feelings about this. I have my own personal experiences in Israel, or I have my family's experiences in Israel, and they're coloring the way I'm taking in this information. So bringing their full selves to this conversation, and also recognizing that we don't do we there has been a tendency in Jewish education to underestimate the nuance that teens are ready to engage with when it comes to really difficult conversations about Israel. And so I'm just going to put in I didn't mean to, but Alana, you teed me up so well. This beautiful curriculum that really welcomes everything that's absolutely beautiful about Israel and everything that's really complicated and messy and hard about the country and its government. And so just if you're wondering, ooh, I wonder if there's something out there that would help me have those conversations, we got you.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that, Shuli, is um, I've been hearing this very idea, which is that and not just teens, but Jewish people need to have forums where we can actually have in-depth conversation that are respectful, that like acknowledge that not everything is going to be a political slogan, or not everything can be reduced to, which side are you on? And that it is an incredibly complex, again, I always say this is like thousands of years old, this conflict. So it's like not an easy one to solve. But I do feel like one of the things that we are doing is, in addition to thinking about what teens need to just support themselves, is to help parents and teens navigate this together, because they're often reading very different media, seeing very different things. They don't necessarily share the same language around some of the issues. And so in addition to thinking about this particular curriculum that Shuli's mentioning, that's part of our Kulam program for high school students, we're also releasing a program that is a family education for younger students, middle school age students, that is with parent and child chavruta, having dialogue around some of these questions in a way that does look at the wonders and the challenges. So I think that we're definitely aligned with what the research is saying in terms of Jewish organizations, institutions creating space to have that kind of conversation.
I'm going to pivot us a little bit away from these conversations about anti-Semitism and Israel, because I'll notice that the most questions we got were about anti-Semitism in Israel, but actually the data shows us that the number one stressor for Jewish teens is the number one stressor for all teens, which is academics and school and the hard parts of being a teen. So let's just like sit with the fact that Jewish teens are also just teens. And Amalya, can you say a couple words? Like, how does that piece resonate with you? Like, yeah, that's the most stressful part, or is it different for you?
Oh, it definitely is, because like, we grow up school, and then you get to high school and it's like, oh, well, now start thinking after high school, what do you want to do? More school. And like, I definitely like, I want to go to college. And so right now, this is actually like the first break that I've had from studying for my AP Physics final, which now I'm trying to balance with like, I'm going to be away the weekend before my AP Physics final to be with friends. So then like trying to balance, the social life of being a teenager, but also like after school and college, and like just trying to fit it all in. And then, you add in sports. So I'm skipping a sports practice to study for my AP Physics final, to then go hang out with friends, to like, so it's all just like, there's so much that we're supposed to be doing. And they're not giving us enough time. And it's like, just so much at once.
Just a moment. Let's all just take a moment to appreciate Amalya, who is taking her 1 hour off from studying from AP Physics to be here with us. That is not how most teens would choose to spend that hour of fun. But Amalya, if this is your fun, we are so happy to have you. Daniel, can you say a couple of words of, not always, a lot of teens are very self-motivated. A lot of that pressure does come from internally. I know working with our leadership-oriented teens, I see it that a lot of that drive comes from somewhere within themselves, and sometimes intentionally or unintentionally, it's also coming from parents. Do you have any advice for parents who are seeing their kids get so stressed out about school? What can they do to be a force for good in those moments?
So my first piece of advice is listen to what Amalya is saying. She's making space for friends. She's making space for moving the body, athletics, sports, making space for studying. And one of the key elements for teens to not feel that kind of crazy anxiety is to have a balanced life. And I think that that's really, really important. If a teen does not have fun and does not play and does not have time off, it is very, very hard to concentrate. And I think that like in the most extreme academic settings, even there, you need to have those kinds of breaks. I can say like my daughter right now is in her first year of medical school, which is like super hard academically. And they have ping pong tables all over the campus because they want to make sure that their students just take a break from their brain and just like play and have fun. So I do think it's really important to have that balance. The other thing I want to say about what we know about academic anxiety, which is a specific kind of anxiety, which like has its own kinds of treatment, is that academic anxiety is very real. And what helps the most for a teen is to break down any big task into what is a small task that I can accomplish. And I think that before we race to like, this is a mental health problem with my child, one of the first steps that I think parents can take is just say, what are my child's study skills? And can I help my child with their study skills in a positive way? And because that really is like, I think what Amalya is saying right now, it's like overwhelming. The amount of stuff you have to learn for AP Physics is overwhelming. The only way to do it is one flashcard at a time. So it's like a little by little is the way to do it. And I do think that that's important because when parents do engage their kids in this conversation, I think the immediate thing the teens want to say is just go away. So being supportive around academic anxiety is really important. And there are lots of tools and lots of people who are writing about how to reduce academic anxiety. And that's really important. We have within the Moving Traditions curriculum, we do have sessions about dealing with academic stress and how to de-stress. And that is something that we just know that pretty much every Jewish kid that we work with is dealing with that. So yeah, it's there.
Alana, did you want to add anything to the conversation about academic stressors for teens?
No, I think you both covered it really beautifully. I mean, it's, came through loud and clear in the study. It's the top stressor. The sentiment that there's like so many expectations and how do you even balance all of that came through loud and clear. I'd say the only thing that maybe was a little bit different or unique was just those that were older, thinking ahead to college and having to make choices not just based off of academic stressors, but off of places where they thought they were going to be safe. So that's an added and more unique, I would maybe contributor to stress and anxiety for those that or even those that had siblings who were in college that would also cause them stress in the data. But yeah,
It's so interesting to think about how the different stress factors layer on top of each other. And so academics, but then thinking about how anti-Semitism affects how you feel about academics and all of those things. I want to make sure to spend a minute. Moving Traditions made a name for itself in the world by understanding that gender and sex and sexuality are enormous lenses by which teens experience the world. It really colors and shapes. And acknowledging that has made us, I think, much better at meeting teens where they are and understanding how to educate teens. And lo and behold, a lot of really interesting things about sex and sexuality, even in the survey, which wasn't specifically focused on that. We saw 63% of teens identifying as straight, which means that, I'm doing the math right, 37% were identifying as something other than straight. That's a huge percentage of teens identifying in that way. And again, in that top 5 list of stressors, sexuality and gender made that top 5 list of stressors. So I'm curious to ask the panelists, I mean, the study didn't go into depth within that subgroup of teens who identify as something other than straight, but I'm curious, what do you see in your own lives, or what are you making of what we see in this study about that both being a stressor for teens and also such a high number of teens identifying as LGBTQ plus in some way?
I mean, I think it becomes such a stressor among teenagers' lives because it's like people put so much pressure on like, oh, well, what do you want to do in the future? What do you want to do now? What do you think about this? But like when it really comes down to it, it's like, who am I? Like I need to figure out who I am and how I identify and how I view myself to figure out, like what is my place in the world and what do I want my trajectory to be as I kind of move out into a bigger world.
That's fascinating, Amalya. That's such an interesting take of like, this is all part of just seeing who you are, which is the number one task of teens, is trying to figure out who they want to be, who they are and who they want to be in this world. Daniel, how would you, what would you respond to that?
I mean, I think that um, we were mentioning before that we underestimate teens like thinking about the complexity of the identity. I think teens are in a very existential place, and trying to figure out who they are is really important. And the way that people can be has changed for the better. I want to say that it is better that more people are expressing who they are. It is better that more people have more options to be who they are. It is better that we have more ways to identify. It is good to be beyond the binary in our thinking. And I think that that's important to embrace. And it's my general sense that why we have more teens that are identifying as beyond straight is, first of all, we're doing an okay job in the Jewish community making space for people that are queer, non-binary, all sorts of things. We could do a better job, but we are doing an okay job. But also, I think that there is something wonderful about the fact that even if we look at non-Jewish teens, the number of non-Jewish teens who are identifying as queer is double what it used to be. And so I think like that is also wonderful. We're in a place where there is a little bit more freedom. I want that freedom to exist. And I think that freedom is healthy for everybody. So I sense that like that is still a stressor, and I'm interested in some of the other questions that I have around gender specifically. I know that every single time I've seen a study of depression or anxiety, the number of girls who experience depression or anxiety is much higher than the number of other folks who do. And I'm still like thinking what's going on there. And I'm also very much aware that boys have a real hard time even identifying their emotions and even saying, I need help. It is not considered masculine to say, I can't do it myself. And I think that that is something that I'm constantly aware of, and really hope that we are able to address. Um, I'm interested, Alana, like when you were able to look a little bit at the gender breakdown, what did you see, and what did you notice, or did you feel like, wow, that's not so many differences? What was your reaction or response?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, well, one of the team members, Dr. Laura Brady, did a little bit more digging into this question specifically as a way to remind all of us that, first of all, just to start with broadly, this research and that we're reporting on right now is we're talking about overall, so like all the teens, and we didn't go in, there's a lot of different demographics that we could go into and divide the groups into, and there's lots of different interesting sub-analysis that could be done here, or this could spearhead future research in a more specific, targeted to different research questions, right? And the data will be available in the Berman Data Archive, so future researchers can have access to it and do some of this interesting disaggregated analyses to see what differences exist. Dr. Laura Brady did do some of the analysis, and there is an appendices at the end that sort of looks at gender and sexuality specifically, because it was an interesting way to demonstrate that while overall the stress around sex and gender was, number 5 on the list of stressors, when you look at teens who don't identify as cisgender, for them that stress was much higher. Or even teens who declined to answer, for them, the stress was higher. And so we know that depending on your identity, as we started the conversation with identity centrality, what causes you stress is going to be different from others. And so I think this research is just the beginning to show us that for Jewish teens specifically.
That's so wise to point out, Alana, and I'll also just lift up a comment from the chat, which is from Dr. Sarah Levine, who's also our newest board member. Hi, Sarah. And also practices adolescent medicine, something that Deborah Meyer, my predecessor as CEO of Moving Traditions, would always say is when she would say something about gender, people would always start referencing trans or non-binary teens, and she would have to like kind of shake them and remind them like, even if you're cisgender, you still have a gender. Everyone has a gender. And Sarah is reminding us, like, yes, LGBTQ plus teens are thinking a lot about sexuality, but every teen is thinking about sex and sexuality. That is one of the primary lenses through which teens are seeing the world. So thank you for reminding of that. I'm gonna just probably ask one more question. We got to some of the questions. This is definitely one from the chat, which is there were a lot of people looking at the data saying like there were a lot of teens who had a lot of places they felt like they could be themselves, and there were some teens that didn't have any places they felt like they could truly be themselves. And I know for Moving Traditions, it's a really significant point of pride that we have a lot of surveys and data that tell us that teens, when they enter our programs, they feel like they can bring their full selves to our programs, and they feel they can fully be themselves in our programs. And this is specifically for Daniel, who helps shape those programs. What do you think makes our program something that teens feel they can be their full selves in?
Well, reflect back to something that that I really feel like was clear from the teens in the data set, which is the value of Jewish friends. And one of the things that we started, I'm just going back to 14 years ago, when I was involved in the first research study of Rosh Chodesh, and it was a longitudinal study of young women who were in college, some of them in graduate school, asking them about their experience as teenagers. Was that it really created two things came out of it. It really created like a sense of friendship, like I could really be vulnerable with other Jewish girls, and I could really get support from other Jewish girls. I could learn about like I'm not alone, and learn like other people are struggling with some of the things I'm struggling with. And also the second thing was having a caring adult who is not grading you or saying you can play and you can't play or whatever a coach does, but having just a caring adult just say, what's going on with your life? Let's talk about what's going on is incredibly powerful. And I think that we try to be as teen focused as we can in our training and in our curriculum, which is to say, it takes a long time to help a teen feel comfortable in a group setting. But once you do feel comfortable in a group setting, and then an adult can guide you through like some of those more vulnerable conversations, that's amazing. And I think like that's the magic, which is feeling like the friendships are central and the sharing is central. And that's like where people can be themselves. And hopefully we can get more folks feeling like, oh, I found a place where I can be myself.
I love that, bringing us full circle to what Amalya was saying when we started about that group of friends that she's had since childhood, and how much solace that's provided even when things are really hard. We are getting close to the end of our time, so rather than ask another question, I'm just going to ask every panelist, is there something that's burning that you didn't get to tell us? I'm going to take a quick whip around to our three panelists. You can pass if nothing's on your mind, but one more chance to tell the folks on this Zoom something that they should learn from this data, something they should understand from your experience. I'm going to start where we started to begin with, which was the Amalya, if you feel comfortable, or do you need a little more time?
Nothing's coming to mind right now, but I'll keep thinking.
Okay, you can motion if you want me to come back to you. Alana, do you feel ready?
Sure. I mean, there were a lot of things in the study. One of the other research members of this team, Dr. Ari Kelman, often talks about how, this is all new. This research is, as far as we know, the first to look at Jewish teen well-being across the country. So a lot of the findings in it surprised us. The finding on Jewish identity centrality and how a Jewish teen feels about the importance of their Jewish identity to them, and its impact on both stressors and well-being was something we spent quite a bit of time on. I think the impact of October 7th and everything that happened afterwards was surprising, and it was difficult and emotional reading through all the responses from teens. It really made a lasting impact, and We tried to summarize it in the report, so I look forward to everyone getting a chance to see it a bit more deeply. I think there's a number of findings that we didn't get to talk about on the webinar that are also surprising that people will see for, I'm trying to think if I open that or just hold it for the report. Maybe we'll hold it there. But I mean, we talked about the dual burden, and I think you all sort of held up also another dual dynamic here around parents, of parents both being in the list of stressors, number 3 there, right, I believe, and also parents being a huge source of support, and sort of like this amazing ability of our teens to be able to hold dynamic relationships and to both see them as something that causes them challenge, but also causes them great solace and support. So yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm really excited for people to get to dig into this data more and to hear some reflections as they come.
I love that. Honestly, Alana, thank you.
So I was thinking about 2 different levels of thinking about this connection of my Jewish identity and how that contributes to my well-being. So the first level I was thinking about is just on the most basic teen level, which is that I just understand so many teens as searching for a place where they feel like they belong, like where they can be accepted and loved and celebrated. It's like, because so much teen culture is so judgy, and it's so like, everybody just like ridiculing everybody else and putting people down, and like just feeling like you belong somewhere is just such a positive and contributes to your well-being. So I was thinking about it first on that level, but then I was also thinking about it on a more, I would say, spiritual level. And that is really connected to the work of Dr. Lisa Miller, who talks about how when you have a religious or spiritual core, and it really doesn't matter how religious or how spiritual or what kind of religious or what kind of spiritual, but when you have a core that is about your connection to the natural world and connection to animals and connection to people and connection to something higher, like all those things, it really helps you navigate through periods of depression. And so I think like there's something about that piece that I'm interested in. Like, is part of this just saying part of it is belonging, and part of it might be something beyond belonging, and something about what it is to bring people together and to feel, wow, we're doing something that has been done together for thousands and thousands of years, and we're following the cycles of the moon, and we are in sync with the planet. And like that is a very powerful idea, which as the world gets crazier, it makes more sense to be grounded. So there's
Love
that.
that, Daniel. And I'll add a final researcher to bring into the mix, which is Daniel. I love how you're talking about sort of that core of connection to something greater than yourselves and how that contributes to a sense of well-being, to your epoch scores. I also really love the research of Dr. Laurie Santos, who's a researcher at Yale University, who talks a lot about it's not just about that core. Like people who are religious do report a higher sense of well-being. And you would think it's because like, oh, I have this faith, like God will protect me, the world is going to be just in some way. And actually what it correlates most highly with is participation in religious life, the architecture of religious life, the Shabbat dinners or the spaghetti dinners or the whatever your church is throwing is that getting yourself to participate is in and of itself doing yourself a kindness of giving yourself a higher sense of well-being. And we saw a little in the research here where teens with a higher participation in programs did show at least higher optimism. So I think it's reflected in the research here. And then finally, my ultimate takeaway, which is, raising Jewish children, having been raised Jewish myself, and thinking about the responsibility I learned that comes with being Jewish, and sometimes therefore the burden that comes with being Jewish, and ultimately what we see from this research, which is also, and it is so, so worth it. It contributes so much to our lives. So thank you to Alana, to Daniel, to Amalya for being here tonight for these incredible presentations, to the folks at BeWell, if they're still with us right now, for making this study happen. If you liked what you heard, we would love for you to do more with Moving Traditions. So if you like what you heard, there are a number of programs for institutions to run with Moving Traditions that are going to make Jewish education come alive. That includes the B Mitzvah Family Education Program, Kulam for Hebrew high schools, which does include that new Israel curriculum that we are finding there's a huge appetite for right now among Jewish institutions. Our gender affinity spaces, which include Rosh Chodesh, Shevet, and Salem. You heard Daniel talk about the power of having that cohort of people that you just feel like you can totally be yourself with. There's nothing better in the world, and we give folks the tools to build those kinds of communities. And finally, Culture Shift, which provides training for educators at any institution. Some of the people in this webinar right now have teens themselves, or parents, or are parents of teens, or are teens. Please encourage your teen to apply for one of our leadership opportunities, the Koleinu Fellowship, or Kumi, and you yourself, our last program that you're able to participate in. Please keep coming to our webinars. Finally, we hope we made clear from this webinar, Moving Traditions loves to keep learning. Help us keep learning. Help us keep getting better. Take this survey. Tell us what you loved. Tell us what we should do differently next time. Just use your smartphone camera. Put it on the screen right now. Get that QR code. Fill out that survey right away. You never have to think about it again, and we'll get to learn from it. What a mitzvah. And let us know what you want to see more of in our future webinars. Finally, if you're moved to do so, please consider making a gift to Moving Traditions. And thank you so, so much for being here with us tonight. Have a good night.